Welcome to Live.Work.Thrive. I'm Michaela Birmingham, Scary Mommy executive producer, and I will be the moderator for tonight's panel. For the first time in recent history, children around the world stopped going to school, stopped having birthday parties, stopped seeing grandparents, and began operating video conferencing software in kindergarten. Our kids have had to adapt to all the changes and challenges none of us, not even most scientists, saw coming. Tonight, we will discuss how the past year has impacted our children, from the way they've proved their resilience to the ways we worry that pandemic stress may leave a lasting impact on our kids' mental health. So if you are experiencing more frequent tantrums, disinterest in virtual school, or sense anxiety in your child that seems new, stick around. Tonight, we will cover how stress impacts children differently than adults, how virtual environments can positively and negatively impact our kids, how to support children through scary news and major transitions, and how to know when to seek professional help for your child's mental health. Now let's meet our panelists. Tonight we have with us Dr. Jenny Radesky, a developmental behavioral pediatrician and media researcher. She received her MD from Harvard Medical School, trained at Seattle's Children's Hospital, Boston Medical Center. Her research focuses on the use of mobile and interactive technology by parents and young children and how this relates to child self-regulation and parent-child interaction. Hi, Jenny. So great to have you back with us.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Also tonight with us is Jo Frost, global parenting expert, best-selling author, and you may know her as the television personality, the Super Nanny. For anyone who has signed up for tonight and a future Live.Work.Thrive event, you will be eligible to win an exclusive invite to an intimate Q&A session with Jo later on this month. The virtual session would be you and a small group of other parents seeking advice from Jo. Those tickets are valued at $165 and they're hard to get. So visit scarymommy.com/live-work-thrive if you have not already signed up for an event so you can be eligible to join Jo for that exclusive event. So before we get started, we have a couple quick reminders. We want you to submit your questions to Jo and Dr. Radesky on wherever you're watching. So if you're on Facebook, if you're on YouTube, hit the comment section, put your question in there, and our producers will be filtering those to us in real time. We may feature your question later on in the show. Also, join our mailing list so you don't miss any of our upcoming virtual events. Visit scarymommy.com/live-work-thrive to sign up and stay in touch. So let's get started. I want to start now with the word on the street from the children. Okay, we spoke to some real kids about how they are feeling about the past year. Let's now watch a short clip where kids themselves share their thoughts. Here's the clip.
Sad.
Sad.
Sad. Miserable.
Tiring.
Boring.
It was fun and different.
I miss field trips on school.
Getting to see my friends every day.
I didn't get to hang out with my friends.
Going to like a bunch of stores without masks.
I miss the fact that the playground is closed more.
My favorite thing, a part of this year, was meeting my new teachers.
I like that we're going back 4 days a week.
I like eating tomatoes while I'm at Zoom. My favorite part about Zoom school is staying in my pajamas while I work in my comfy bed under my covers.
It's like okay because I get to wake up a little bit later.
Remote day schools were easy.
Every time I say, when is it over, when is it over, when is it over?
Virtual learning is fine. I don't really have too many opinions on it. It's not good or bad. I don't like it that we're not actually in the school.
Because everybody's at home.
I didn't like having my camera on.
And I don't like that we have to wear the masks.
I do not like the mask.
Sometimes I forget to wear my mask and it's really annoying, so I'm not a big fan of the whole mask things, but it's to keep everybody safe.
I just love those kids. I mean, they're so unfiltered and, giving us, their true feelings. My favorite is the little guy who said he likes to eat tomatoes over Zoom. I mean, like that's
Exactly.
a highlight for sure. So Joe Frost, thank you so much for being with us here tonight. I heard some of these kids say sad, boring, miserable, tiring, and my favorite, when is it over? I think we all could use that line on a t-shirt right now. We all want to know, when is it over? Kids definitely have felt this pandemic. What would you say to parents out there? How can we help validate what our kids are feeling?
By acknowledging. I mean, you heard those little children. I'm going to say the silent witnesses of this pandemic, because I believe to a large degree they have been. They are dependent on us adults, parents, to provide a safe, secure environment for them. And I think we see, or should I say we hear from these children, and we see as parents, truly this resilience in really how children can adapt to a new environment if it is guided with parents who certainly can adapt to the circumstances, which has been very difficult for everybody over the last 18 months because there was so much uncertainty. And a lot of that was based on us looking up to government, to mayors, to policies for guidelines. And there was a lot of mixed messages. And where there are mixed messages, lays an enormous amount of uncertainty in the ground that you can lay for your children to feel secure and comforted. But I think it's incredibly important that, in general, being able to have good, thorough communication and certainly that emotional connection with our children, that these conversations have to be held with compassion, with empathy, with time, with open arms, with a tone that certainly validates exactly how they're feeling, because their feelings belong to them. And we've all experienced this pandemic, certainly in different ways, hence why we're here today. But I certainly feel that these children that we've just listened to and the millions across this country have echoed exactly what parents have been feeling. And what I've heard in what we've just listened to there is that where there were parents that were able to explain, here are the rules, we're not going to like it, but it's a must right now. When children are shown how to transition into a space that they may not like, but it's the rules right now, then they have an easier time. So I feel for those parents that really struggled and may have been very rigid in themselves to adapt, to flow into a space of accepting what they could and what they couldn't control, to let go and surrender to things that they were holding on to with white knuckles. I feel the ramifications of that certainly had an impact on the children at home. So I think it's important to validate how they're feeling, to be able to look at what we can do to ease up the transitions of schooling, certainly as it's been a moving target, what allows us to be able to understand how we can connect so that the children are having more socialization. And that really does depend, especially with young children, on how parents really carve out for themselves what will happen during the day, because children are following the stability and the security of a routine, as we hope we are. That went out the window in the first 2 quarters of 2020 because we all went into survival mode. And I feel
for sure. I think that's an excellent point about routine, because that, like you say, it threw all of us off. We had no idea what was going to be the result of, like, schedule's gone, everybody's home. So let's get back to routines for a second. But you said something else, Joe, about, we all experienced the pandemic differently. And Jenny, Dr. Radesky, I was wondering if in your work as, someone who works directly with kids as well, have you seen different impacts on different ages of kids in terms of mental health? I have 2 teen girls, and I say to them all the time, you're at the best age for a pandemic. You can operate the computer alone. You don't need me to do your homework with you. You're not missing any graduations. You're right in the middle. No milestones are getting ruined here. But the little ones, your heart really goes out to those little ones who, have to sit there. And like you heard the little guy saying, when is it going to be over? That's all I'm thinking when I'm in school. So Jenny, do you see that it is kind of more rough on different sections of children?
So it differs definitely by age and by kids' own temperament. And just, you call me Jenny, don't call me Dr. Odesky.
Okay.
But what I heard in those kids was, they all seem to be in that early school age when they're used to school being so sensory. You go into this classroom where you're surrounded by other kids and all the stuff on the walls, and you're sitting in circle time and you're having these shared community learning experiences. You're making meaning of things together. You are on the playground. Like I was hearing kids missing their freedom of just going on the playground and getting to, do unstructured play. And that was one of the roughest ages, the kind of 4, 5, 6, 7, from what I saw in my patients or my own kids, is that their brains are still immature enough that virtual learning was really hard. They couldn't resist all those distractions. It was hard to process the learning through just a 2-dimensional screen. The learning wasn't as meaningful to them. They were like, I have a checklist of math problems to do. It's not the same thing as going in and like learning, robotics or other science stuff that's hands-on. And then I heard also families with little kids struggling too, because you're just with them all the time. They were worried their children weren't socializing enough. They were worried that their littlest kids are building norms of all this screen time is totally fine and everyone wears masks. And they're wondering what their little minds think of the world. But then the oldest kids, I have an 11-year-old, he could handle the online curriculum okay, but the lack of social interaction was so much harder. Because right around that middle school age is when peer relationships become so crucial for kids' identity formation, for them to, again, like make sense of the world, figure out what they should be thinking about and doing. So missing out on those social dynamics has been hardest for the oldest kids. And what I said earlier about temperament is that, we know not all kids are the same. We're all born kind of wired all slightly differently. And some kids really had a highly anxious or shut down response to this pandemic. Other kids have just been like rolling along, puttering along and doing okay. But I sense a lot of everyone just being done. Our nervous systems like went up fight or flight for a long time. And now we're all like kind of burned out and exhausted and a little dysphoric. And I do think that's a universal thing from little kids all the way up to grown-ups, that we all have this sense of burnout.
That is so true. Oh, sorry, Joe, go ahead.
I was going to say, to echo what Jenny was saying, I think it's quite interesting because at that moment, and I've mentioned this for the last 18 months, COVID came and it highlighted also fundamentally some of the parental challenges that were already existing. So if you had a child, certainly that was used to early learning education and certainly playing toys and games that expanded their attention, then certainly they had the ability for a small period of time to sit in front of a Zoom and to engage and to participate in what was expected as part of this hybrid circumstance. But to put that circumstance without those abilities and those early learning abilities into a circumstance that was so heightened, with maybe perhaps a mother with 4 children, it was a perfect storm for everybody feeling very exasperated from the circumstance. So it was important to certainly, I believe, educate families of what they could let go of and to have a realistic expectation. There was this sort of premise, and I remember these memes going out, with mothers saying, we're not an octopus. We can't teach the clarinet and be there with our 4-year-olds and at the same time teach equations. Like, I don't know how to do it. And the fact is, you weren't supposed to know how to do it, and so there was a lot, parents put a lot of pressure on themselves to meet this perfect target that would have been impossible for all of us, to have met.
That is so true. I mean, I heard something the other day where there was an expectation that everyone was supposed to have a transformation over this pandemic, like learn a language or, write a screenplay or do and you're like, those are the people with no kids. Like there's no transformation, right?
Completely. Yeah,
And
I think
it's so much pressure to Joe's point. It's unrealistic expectations. And I think as parents, you do what you can to read the books and that, losing teeth is coming down the road and the first day of this or that is going to happen and you're used to it and you know what to tell them. But when you're learning that morning on the news what the latest regulation is and taking your own time to process it, it's tough to now transport that information and stress and anxiety to something that makes sense to a child, for sure. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, it was like a game of Simon Says, switch.
Right. Oh, you cannot keep up. It's impossible. And to this point, right now there's so much uncharted territory, and really the major source of upheaval has been the disruption of in-person school. So that's kind of like the root for so many, and those who had younger ones in daycare once everything shut down or went into a virtual mode. That's really, at the foundation for so many of us. Joe, I was curious for you, because the rules, like you say, are changing so rapidly. We're now in the situation where Jenny has described, we hit this peak level of stress. We're coming back down. We're in this burnout phase. But now in some areas, they're saying, hey, guys, guess what? Next week, you're going back to school. And I'm hearing from, just anecdotally, from parents that the kids are freaking out. They're like, what? I don't know if I could do this. Like I was just at a new welcome to the new school event for incoming students to my kids' own school. And the kids were so nervous. And the parents were like, oh, I don't know how this is going to work out. They've been home for a year and a half. So, Joe, what would you say to a parent? How could they prepare for this transition, with so much anxiety and so much upheaval that they're just coming off of?
Well, I think we have to address the anxiety, period, because the anxiety will exasperate and will magnify any circumstance, which I'm sure we'll hear from Jenny, medically, the impact that has, and certainly how to practically live alongside anxiety, because I feel that should be the consensus of how we identify that anxiety is existing in us, has an impact on every little thing that we do. I certainly feel that it feels to me like a really long, taking away the medical and the anxiety, it feels to me, from listening to thousands of parents over the last year, that there was this long extended summer break. And now we're feeling a little bit anxious of how we're going to dip our toes in the water and feel okay with the news of these different rules. Number one, let's get the facts so that we can make our kids feel safe in the environment that they're going to go into. Let's have an open dialogue. Look, I feel it was missing a long time ago. And we realized that teachers have been out there heroically, doing everything that they can with our children. It's like there's a newfound appreciation between parent and teacher. Let's have that open dialogue. Let's talk about what's concerning us. Let us have the teachers explain that's going to make us feel safe and secure, because that's what we're all striving for, is the safety and the security, so that we can parlay that information into tangible conversations regarding to the age group that we are raising, right? I also feel that once they understand that, what we should be doing, especially now in America, where we know schools are opening up and we know those who will be going back to school at the end of August, is to do what we were doing during the summer holidays, is to be getting out more. We need children in nature. We need them experiencing the fun safely of things that they will be able to do as we're seeing the world open up, and it will be more during the summer. I would like to think that our families that are now vaccinated and that are now beyond our bubbles, that we are going to start having those relationships with family members and close friends, where there are stayovers during the night and there are play dates and us coming together so that we can get used to them socializing again and mixing. I think there's a heightened, and it is only my opinion, but I do feel because of anxiety, there is this heightened worry. But I do feel for children, it's going to become very instinctual, that once they're in the playground or they're in the swimming area in the summer, that just being around other children and then just freely playing and instinctually connecting with one another, that will be the scenarios that parents can, remember and say, well, remember on Sunday when we went there and you had a great time and it was fun and there was a few rules we had to stick to. Well, this is exactly what's going to happen at school. So laying again, it's all about our communication, how we deliver, the tone in how we deliver this conversation, is the non-verbal and verbal cues that children take from us. Because as parents, we are reassuring them. We are who protect them, our own children, and they'll look up to us for that reassurance. So I believe that will be very, very paramount in the months leading up to them going back full time at the end of August. I'm sure, Jenny, you'll echo, on the anxiety.
Yep. I agree. I think I've seen a bunch of kids really just withdraw into their comfort zones, like being in their PJs in their bed every day, watching their favorite shows. It's really helped them gain a sense of control in a really uncertain time. And I mean, there's also been rises in the rates of eating disorders and other OCD type of diagnoses that are about, they want control. They really want to control their environments and what's going in and out of their body because they feel so out of control with the rest of the world. But to talk about kids, that kind of normative response of, I'm in my comfort zone, I don't want to break out of it again. Exactly what Joe said in terms of these gentle, like reacclimations to play dates, to fun things. Like my kids just went back hybrid a few weeks ago. And my older son was like, it felt like riding a bike. Like you just kind of get back into it. And all that stuff clicked for him. Of course, every child is different. I practice in Michigan where schools have been going back kind of at staggered times. And so many of my kids have been like, yes, school just feels easier in person. It makes more sense. I just like it better. I'm happier there. I have some kids, though, mostly ADHD or autism, who are very rigid. And so they got into this habit of always following their own interests, their own agenda at home. And now they suddenly have to adjust to the group agenda and group thinking at school. And that sort of flexibility has been pretty hard. So certainly some kids really start to show some defiant behaviors that we can work around. We can kind of teach them slowly to be more flexible. But I want to recognize that every kid has had their own little like mini adaptation emotionally to what a strange year this has been. And like Joe said earlier, as a parent, if you kind of step back and say, I wonder how this has been for you. I've been stuck in my own head because I've been working too much, or I've been stressed out about my parents or other things. But let me pause and like calm down my own nervous system and think, how's this been for you? What does that mean about how you're going to adapt or have a really hard time with this re-entry process? And then plan a few things before school reopens to try to ease, flex some of those muscles that they haven't been practicing in a while because they've been home in their bed.
Parents too.
So true.
Yes. The parents too. I mean, we talk so much about different circumstances. We talk about mental health with children and, too much screen time. But, parents have been having a hard time too. Yeah. It's been rigid for them. So again, when you can lead by example, just slowly but surely, little baby steps, and acknowledge that and say, how was that for you? It's an emotional check-in. We check in with everything else, and to be a little bit more self-aware, to emotionally check in with ourselves as parents allows us to recognize where we're at, where that progress is at, and to be able to build on that slowly.
So true. And Jenny, you had mentioned kids, autism or ADHD, having more challenges. We've heard from some parents that kids with social anxiety or difficulty making friends found remote learning was a
Mhm.
relief for
Right.
them because they didn't have to go to school every day and feel like they had to work to fit in. How do you get them to, get enthusiastic about making those social connections when they return to the in-person environment? Is there any tips that you might
I
offer?
know, like, being a shy kid myself, I know how it feels when you go to a birthday party and you're like, I don't know any of these people, and the social dynamics just overload your brain. So many kids feel that in a classroom, but the things I've heard from kids who tend to be more socially anxious is that actually COVID classrooms are more predictable. Everyone has to stay in their own space. Everyone follows a little bit more predictable behavior. So it's a little bit easier to read the social dynamics around you. Number two is have some conversations with kids to try to identify what they miss about the classroom environment, because there's probably something. And so you can list the kind of pros and cons or good or bad things, or you can say, on a scale of 1 to 10, how excited are you to go back to school? And if they're like a 2, say, okay, why weren't you a 1? There must be something in there that might be a nugget of fun that you're looking forward to, and try to build upon that. And then, try to encourage a few play dates with very predictable peers, the sorts of kids that don't throw tantrums or like call your kid names. Like have a few where you can get your child a little bit more comfortable with reading someone else's mind and building some confidence that they can handle it.
Good tip. I like that. So I think part of this too is, because this is new for everyone, parents are automatically thinking the worst, right? Like, oh my gosh, this generation is going to be scarred. The kids are stressed, and sometimes the kids actually surprise us and are a lot more resilient than we give them credit for. But if there is, a situation, Joe, what could some signs that your child is being impacted by stressful situations be? Are there things that you could recognize in your child that might be something to dig deeper and do, as you say, do a check-in? And then also, do kids and adults handle stress differently? I'm curious what you both think there.
I think certainly the first things to look for are the continuation of behavior patterns that have changed. When you look at how things over the last year have been a moving target, looking at the progress of how one has continued to adapt is a good measure of where you're at right now currently. If certainly you're seeing abnormal behavior, as in, look, young children will have outbursts, but I think it's important to recognize whether those outbursts are correlated with an emotional underlying issue, or whether it's a child just saying no and being defiant because they just simply don't want to do what you're asking them. Again, it means that the parent has been at home, and I hope a little bit more intuitive in observing the behavior of their children. So mood swings and instability, lack of sleep. Certainly, Jenny mentioned about eating disorders, but, an irregular behavior that hasn't subsided in any way through effort to connect with understanding what may be the problem. The big question is why. The big question is to ask yourself, why is this happening? What may have changed? How long has this been going on for? What has been the external issues and the roundabout of internal issues that maybe haven't fundamentally been addressed, that have now gone on for too long? And with all efforts that we believe we have tried, we are still in the same space and feeling that there is no change. And at that point, I would say that being able to be courageous enough to recognize that this isn't personal, this isn't about you as a parent not doing good enough, failing, not being able to handle the circumstance. This is about being a parent who courageously can say, I've done all I feel I can do. And I know that I need to be able to reach out for help. For those then that can be able to objectively, because it's very hard to parents objectively to stand back. We're asking them to do, to some degree, an SOS technique, like a paramedic, observe, analyze, but it becomes subjective when you're emotionally involved with your own family as well. But it does allow you then to have the opportunity to speak to a professional with the circumstances that you're seeing and to get that professional help, so that based on that expertise and an objective standpoint, taking in emotionally how each family member or the child may feel, we can start to make small baby steps in subsiding the reactional behavior, the fight or flight response, and putting in healthier patterns and habits and practices to help the family moving forward. Because I do believe that we all gave ourselves the slack that we needed in 2020. But with the world opening up now in 2021, I really pray that this is a transitional year for families to really empower themselves in saying, look, we realize this has gone on too long and it doesn't need to be this way. We can get the help that we need so that we are able to be a family that honors and invests in the emotional and mental wellness of our family. And I think really that's what it's all about, is investing in our family's mental and healthy state of being so that we can thrive and not be in survival mode. Mm-hmm. So we want families to gradually come out of survival mode to thrive in 2021, going into 2022, as externally we start to see things open up and become much safer with vaccinations and the CDC guidelines that help us to be able to do so.
I totally agree with everything you said. And I just want to point out, there's a really good New York Times piece today about recognizing just this, like, when do I have to worry about my child? Because many of us as parents have watched our children react in ways that we haven't seen them do before. And you're so caught up in it because you are their parent, and the grief that you feel or the anxiety you feel or the flood of emotions that you feel watching your child go through that does not make you an objective responder, and you yourself can overreact to what they're feeling. So they make the point that so many of the metrics we use to judge whether teenagers are okay, like how are they doing in school, how are their friendships, and how is their sleep, we just don't have those same metrics this year. And so a few experts talked about things like recognize a real shift in your child's behavior. If there's really, they're chugging along, but all of a sudden there's a big difference and you sense that, that's a time to start asking for help. And I think the other main thing that Joe talked about was, what is their response to intervention? So if you make a few changes, at times where I've been more worried about my own kids' behavior, I've been like, I'm going to take it easy at work, or I'm going to wake up earlier and do work so I can spend time with them in the afternoon. I'm going to talk to my friend who's a speech therapist. We're going to, I'm going to sit with my husband and try and figure out how we're going to react less to them. And when we make those changes and we feel some successes, that what reassures me, like, okay, we're doing good enough. Like we're not perfect and awesome right now, but we're okay. But if you're not seeing that improvement, then talk to their pediatrician, talk to therapists or social workers that you might know to see who's available and can work with you.
So you mentioned sleep as one potential indicator. I feel like this pandemic has even thrown bedtimes off the rails, because if the kids don't have to wake up as early to get out the door, they of course negotiate. And I know Joe's going to say, keep the bedtime the same as it was before, probably. But even with my kids, I feel like I have two, they get the same amount of sleep, but one is always tired. The other one isn't. Do I have to worry about this? I mean, she's a couple years older. I feel like, do the teens need more sleep at some point where they just decide that they want to sleep all the time?
Teens need more sleep. That is biologically driven.
So I'm not kicking her out of the bed.
Kids also differ in their arousal thresholds. So one thing that our nervous systems have all done adapting to this, at first acute stress and then kind of chronic stress and uncertainty, is that our nervous systems have kind of gotten to new thresholds where it's harder for us to sleep, or we're just dragging all day, or we are having trouble focusing and concentrating. Writing a grant for me this year was like miserable because I couldn't keep my attention span. Or you may have a kid who is just, they have a tantrum at the drop of a hat, right? So all of our nervous systems are a little bit more kind of wired up or dragging. And so helping understand that arousal difference in your child, I know arousal sounds like sexy, but it's not. It's about your nervous system's like
different show, Jenny. We'll have that show on another time, but I like where your head's at.
Just so parents don't think I'm weird, that there's there's a state of your child's brain's alertness and like readiness to take on new tasks. In early childhood, we use color zones to talk about this, the like blue zone, the green zone, yellow zone, red zone. And so it's good to like figure out how your child adapts to being in that zone and like what gets them focused and in the green zone. They might need a walk around the block or some stretching or some like good pumping music on or other things that help them with their alertness.
Interesting. So Joe, you mentioned like the wellness and the self-care for the kind of mental health of the children and the family as a whole. Are there daily habits that you recommend just across the board that are part of that mental health hygiene that parents might think about if they feel like they maybe need a little bit of a reset?
Yeah, I mean, look, I couldn't echo any more than what Jenny just said, because the truth of the matter is that when we can, and I hope millions of families will, after this panel talk, start to just tune in a little bit more closer to understanding their own children and temperaments, then we make a decision whether we need to upbeat with positive highs, right? Because that saying habit breeds familiarity is a fact, right? That's true. The more something is a good habit that is healthy for us, that makes us feel good, right? They're all positive highs and habits and practices to continue. And it could be that your children has felt quite still, that they haven't had much movement, that they haven't been doing much. And that's really about us understanding what are the basic measures that we can put in place for our family right now that can be consistent, create natural positive highs that will be good for our body, good for our brains, right? The biochemistry reactions that we have that help us to sleep better, to perform better, to generally feel better, to feel good, right? That's how it would tangibly come across to families. Like, I feel slightly more upbeat. Yeah. I feel like that what was very overwhelming is not so much overwhelming over the last 4 weeks. It's about really honoring those habits of ritual and routine. And they are the basic steps. But if we can put them in place, I think they make a profound difference in every family. So making sure that we are getting outside, our kids are being active, our kids are moving, whether that's on their scooters, whether it's taking a daily hike or a walk or a long walk around the block, or taking the bikes out or getting out with the stroller with the twins. It's being out, moving, getting fresh air. Kids have been indoors. They've been playing more screen time than ever, not just educational wise, but also because parents have said, there's the electronic babysitter. We all know we've done it, but when we overuse these things, we abuse the tool that we have. Making small choices to be more regular with our eating so that we can establish healthy eating patterns of healthier food. No good, no bad, just healthier options, right? And that takes planning, making sure that we can stick. I am a stickler for saying that we have to honor the importance of sleep, because I do believe that sleep deprivation is one of the, well, if not the top important need, right? That we all treat as if it's like a luxury these days. Our bodies need sleep, right? To repair, to function, right? And we know scientifically there is so much data with respect to what that deprivation looks like from 1 month to 6 months to a year. So it's going to take parents to say, look, okay, let's start making some better choices here that are healthier for the entire family. Let's time manage better. Let's look at the staples, the cornerstones of a routine that support healthy sleep for all of us, especially when we're in the red zone and we want to get to amber before we can start to feel a lot better in the green box. That takes anywhere for 3 months with anybody who's right now going through acute or panic disorder. It's the repetition of the healthy rituals and routines that we put in place that create those healthy habits. So I do hope we can prioritize those meal plans, that we can regulate screen time, that we can get out more as we socialize, get in the fresh air, the natural light, that we can have fun and relax and laugh. It's a good, tonic, right? To have some fun and to laugh again and to be silly. Parents have been so uptight. They've been so stressed. They've forgotten how to play with the kids and to have fun, or how to just be goofy themselves and to relax with their own partners. So, it's the yin and the yang. Energetically, children feel that. And so when we can be a little bit more self-disciplined, I'm not asking parents to just jump from A to C, but when we can just say, right, let's curb that in and start curbing it a little bit in, and now start creating this habit that will have such a profound benefit, then what we'll see over time is the results of that. So it may not be what parents want to hear right now, Michaela, but it's certainly what's going to be good and what they need for them right now and their families.
Sure. I think you're so right. I think I always, as a mom, I look back at those mornings where you're late and everyone's grouchy and nobody can find their book or their health survey form that they need to show at the door of the school. And that's not the time to try and improve. You got to get out the door. It's like the day before when you're like, okay, what things do we have to do so that we can all wake up half an hour earlier to not be scrambling in and be late. It's kind of like backing into the goal that you hopefully, want to achieve later, right?
Well, you've mentioned something I believe is important and that gets thrown around in our profession very frequently, the word consistent. We know consistency leads to success in whatever that goal and desire is. But what we need to talk about is how do we create that framework of consistency? If we are to get up and be more prepared and organized and have the sleep that we need and honor that, whether it's 8 hours, 10 hours, for our infants, 12 hours, then it means that we have to say no to certain things. It means that we can't stay up till 2 o'clock in the morning watching the box set, and then think that we're going to go to bed and wake up and not be groggy or feel like we're chasing time. It means that we have to be in a space of where we can say, no, that wouldn't be good for me. I need to do what's going to serve myself so that I can help myself when it comes to how I'm helping the family as well. So it does take a discipline to say, can't I have it now, all of it, because I'm in this red box and I want to get to the green box.
100%. I feel like we all get the right to say no. I'm so over feeling bad or guilty for saying no. I'm embracing the no. 2021 is the year of no, because I need the sleep, and Joe said I do. So I want to, because we're getting near the end of our session, I want to touch on a serious topic that we've been hearing more and more about, and that is the issue of suicide. There's been some alarming stories that we've heard in different parts of the country where they've actually worked to rapidly reopen schools in areas where they've seen a spike in young people taking their own lives, which is so tragic. And when you hear these stories, I'm always so, obviously, your heart goes out to the families, but you hear that it's usually, oh, we had no idea that this child was suffering. So, or we missed the signs and we didn't know that it was this bad. you know, as a parent, it's like something that you hear those stories and it puts the fear of God into you. But, you know, Dr. Radesky, I wanted to just ask you, what language or prompts can parents use to talk about depression and you know, this serious level of anxiety with their kids as it pertains to suicide? Like, should you mention suicide by name, or, you know, how can you even just have that regular check-in conversation? Because I feel like it's kind of impossible to know in some ways, or maybe it's not. You tell us.
No, I mean, so it feels unmentionable because it's so sad and scary and overwhelming. But mental health experts and the American Foundation on Suicide Prevention recommend that you use the word, that you talk about it. It's like, you know, Mr. Rogers said, feelings have to be mentionable and manageable. And suicide usually it is, and even children who make the sort of statements of like, I wish I was dead, or, you know, I just want to disappear, other things like that, they are expressing the like deepest depth of emotion dysregulation, or feeling empty, feeling hopeless. And so as parents, even though it is a really hard conversation to have, you know, like Joe has been saying, we are both role models, and we help contain and interpret our kids' emotional states, because they still have developing brains that haven't fully grasped what all of this means and what their isolation or their sadness means, or what's going on in the world. So kids who you might be worried about suicide sometimes can be the hardest to talk to, right? Because they're closed off in their room, they've locked their door, they don't really seem open and ready for conversation. They're not sidling up to you and being like, hey, mom, let's go for a walk and chat about everything. So the simplest thing that's recommended is just to say, are you okay? And that opens a conversation that is just letting know, I'm thinking about you. I'm putting my own stresses. I'm not sitting here telling you what I think you're feeling, or I'm not just unloading all of my anxiety or anger on you. I'm just here to communicate. And that it may take a couple of entry conversations to have that conversation. They may not want to talk right away, but it might pop up in a car ride or something else where you're not sitting face to face and they feel like there's a demand placed on them to talk about really bad things. They may open up later on. So what that represents is you're saying, I'm here to talk to about it. And that's the best thing you can do, because then hopefully they would come to you with some of those really sad or scary thoughts before taking action on it. Now, when it comes to prevention, like what if you don't know? What if you just want to like build in some routines so that there's regular preventative things that your family can do? So having the daily routines that promote communication and just make it a norm include meal times, where you don't have to just be like, how was your day? But you could say something like, you know, what was the weirdest thing you saw online today? Or like, what was like the most frustrating thing that you saw, the most unfair thing you saw happen, right? Teens want to talk about justice. They may want to talk about drama. They may want to talk about their favorite, movies, and anywhere where you can get an intro to a conversation like that, you can shape it. You could be like, okay, so if
just mention her latest hairdo or outfit, you could talk about Billie Eilish forever.
Exactly. I mean, and then what if you don't know all those things? What if you don't know their music, or the YouTubers that they like, or what games they play? So join them in those digital spaces too. I know it feels weird because you may feel like, I don't know what they do when they go in their room and turn on that screen. And you may not like it but you could say, okay, show me around your Roblox world, or let's watch your favorite makeup tutorials and we'll see what I think about them. Just try and have an open mind, because it's giving you a little like peek into their mind. And that'll help you know how worried to be, but also just to, make it clear to them you're there to talk. Regular family meetings, I do them. I recommend them as like open spaces to be like, what could we do better on, guys? Like, what are our goals? What's really frustrating us? And then ask your teens and school-age kids to bring a plan that you'll consider as part of the solution. And that sort of collaborative problem solving helps open conversations rather than shut them down.
And so that in terms of saying the word suicide, in what kind of context? I mean, like if you hear a story in the news, should you reference some other situation and be like, if you ever get this feeling, come to me. What do you think?
Those are actually opportunities. If there is a suicide in the community, talk about it. They've probably heard about it. And, you could say, what have you heard? What do you think's going on? Ask all open-ended questions to try and get more from your child. If there's a news about it, and you could say things like hurting yourself or, wishing you weren't here anymore, or other ways of talking, like, do you ever feel that way? But it's fine. It's okay to use this word suicide. The consensus is that it's not going to put ideas in a child's head because they already know about it, most likely. I mean, I've even, with my 11-year-old, we've talked about it in terms of news stories, or I really try to make mental health very destigmatized in my family, just because I think I want them to be empathetic for other people who may struggle, or for them to understand their own, vulnerabilities and strengths. So that's why I think it should be very mentionable.
That is a great tip. Jo, did you
I think
want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we're talking about teenagers, and what I'm hearing from Jenny as well is that those conversations, have to be very empathetic and very open. They have to be conversations that are very nonchalant, very casual, very comfortable, so that the teenager already feels that there is an opportunity to be vulnerable. See, we're talking about vulnerability and a child feeling safe in that vulnerability, just like the importance of men. And we know with the high ratio of men and suicide, and stigmatizing conversations around male mental health as well. The importance of knowing that the space that they're in, they will be cradled and honored of what they're talking about through this vulnerable time, this vulnerability right now. And I would say for a teenager that that's already been marked up already. So when we start to have conversations with our 6, 7-year-olds that start to work out, fiction from fatality, and they're questioning death and grief and what's real and what not real, right the way through to the tweenage years, into the teenage years, what it sets is this precedent of open conversation and how we talk about these things and how we respond and validate each other's feelings. It's a gateway that we already show is open to be received with love, with nurture, with understanding. And I feel with teenagers, it's already there. And if we haven't done that, I don't feel it's too late for us to be able to clean the slate in being able to just be very transparent as parents and saying, I feel that times I don't give you the time to talk. We've got younger children and sometimes you want to talk to me and I'm like, not yet. I can't do it right now. So teenagers look at those things, teenagers watch how you respond. They start to work out, is it a good time to speak to parents or not? They seem like they're pretty busy. So we must be the ones to instigate this flow of open dialogue with our families during the week so that it seems very normal and it's not awkward. Because if a teenager feels that, I better not do this because it's going to give a reaction where, my mum's going to freak out in fear that I've mentioned this word and now she's going to be scared and she's going to stop me going out with my friends because she's going to be scared I can't go anywhere in case I do this, then the likely chances are is that they're not going to open up and have that conversation, and they might have it with somebody else, which is still good. We want to have it with somebody else, to feel that they could, but we'd rather they be coming to us because we're setting the example from the age of 5, 6 and so thus.
Right. And watching your body language, not going in there all tense and like, we need to talk about this. It's a big dramatic deal, but saying like, have you ever known anyone? You know what? When I was in college, I knew that you're making it normal. You are making it so that I totally agree, can come to you rather than going to the internet, because there's been, research that a lot of really, self-harming, extreme weight loss, alcohol and drugs, it's all kind of super amplified and targeted based on kids and adults' vulnerability. So I really again, also want kids from this year of being immersed in online spaces to be like, I need to be really savvy about the garbage that's online and that might be fed to me because it might think I'm depressed. When actually, it's really just to get more clicks because that's how the internet makes more money.
That is a great point. We always
and we know exactly, and we know young girls are doing that already. We know that they're having these full-blown conversations, to receive some form of validation, and it's so sad because, we want them to be having those conversations at home. Normalizing these conversations mean that, mental health and family wellness, it is just an everyday thing that like how you sit around a table and come together. So we have
any
to,
point of hygiene.
Yes, absolutely.
Sure.
I echo what Jenny's saying. Those, look at the meal times. It's a gathering. When are those gathering moments? And I think we lost the art of that as parents between giving our children privacy and saying, come and join us. Look, we're all together. We're in the living room. We're watching this together. And sometimes we just continue to allow that because we just feel, it will be too much trouble if the child doesn't want to come down. They may say, oh no, Mom, I want to eat in my room.
I know, but it's so much harder now with mobile devices that you can just take to the room and you're all on your own screen. Or like you said before, even like a parent who really wants to go to bed early, but that like YouTube feed is just perfectly algorithmically predicting what I want to watch next. Like sometimes the digital environment is not setting us up for success. And so I also want parents
that is the one benefit of living in New York City in a small house. You can see the screen all the time. There's no escape. That's the one thing, my kids love it when they go to visit someone in the suburbs. It's like, we have all these rooms. I'm like, not in Brooklyn. You got right here, kitchen table. That's where you're going to do it. Well, before we wrap up, I want to get to a couple quick questions from the audience because people have been sending in questions for you both. So the first one here, Jenny, why don't you take this one? The pressure cooker of everyone being together all the time has caused some intense fighting between me and my eldest son. To be honest, I need a vacation from him. I'm worried we have permanently changed our relationship because of it. Any tips for getting back to enjoying each other again?
Yes, I know how you feel. I think now that grandparents are vaccinated, if you have some relatives that you can have a visit, you can get a night away, you can actually get that physical space from each other, then that's great. Look at summer camps, look at jobs, look at places where you just get distance from each other. You both feel independent and effective and can come together, more joyful and ready to interact. And then think back, your kid, what do you love laughing with them about? Being silly with them about, like, what are the sorts of things where you guys would just lose it together, and try and find that at least just once a day. And then, also check yourself of where you're nitpicking and like jumping in too fast or demanding things of them that could be, changeable behaviors on your part so that you can avoid a little bit of the conflict and add a little bit more of the fun.
Got it. Bring back fun mom. I don't know. Fun moms.
Just a little bit. You don't have to like go crazy and,
She's gone in my house. So Joe, here's one for you. You get the last question. I have an 11-year-old who had a high anxiety shutdown reaction to the last year. She had a lot of social anxiety. Do you have any suggestions for helping her get ready to reintegrate to in-person school?
Yes, I'd like to open up what we've just spoke about. So number one, I do think it's important. We haven't had much time to go into detail, but I would encourage everybody to get the facts around anxiety, what it looks like, how it shapes, the immediate sweaty hands, the hyperventilation, the concern and the worry beforehand, the signs and the symptoms, right, of anxiety, and looking at the importance of what's going to reduce that heightened overreactive sensory response. We cannot ignore that medically anxiety can be reduced if we learn how to live alongside it. I've been living with anxiety myself since the age of 24, when I lost my mother and eventually addressed the grief of that. I know as a woman and as a young woman back then, what my disciplines were in order for me to be able to sustain healthy emotional health, knowing that it will be something that I will live alongside, right, for the rest of my life. And that is a very open conversation. We must embrace that in the family. So let's do our part in understanding, how does anxiety show up with our 11-year-old? What are the habits that we can put in place? And it's not about telling the 11-year-old, it's empowering them to take control of their lives, right? So that they're in control, because a lot of anxiety is feeling not in control of the circumstance. And one of the best things is to call it out, is to literally call it out. I'm feeling anxious about this right now. Again, echoing what Jenny says, it allows us to have that conversation. Let's talk about what you're feeling anxious about. Is it about actually meeting up in this place? Or is it getting together with a few friends that you don't know if they're being safe? It allows us to have that conversation. And then slowly but surely to start introducing our children to going to aunties or to a grandparent, to going out maybe for a little lunch somewhere that's nice. And just maybe a little bit more quieter, because the likely chances are if that child at 11 years old has anxiety, they are overstimulated in a sensory fashion too. So making sure that we can honor the importance of simmering the overstimulation of the sensories too. So I think that alters with understanding the temperament of our child. Is this 11-year-old very outgoing and is now needing more control and needs to feel like they are doing the best that they can and they're happy with this? Or is it a quieter child, someone who's a little bit nervous, a little bit more fragile, with respect to how they're perceiving the outside world, and making sure that we can encourage them. We can also do it by leading by example. Well, why don't we do this together? And then you start to tell me how you're feeling once we've done this for the day, and let's record on that and then remember for the next time. But let's address the elephant in the room, and that's anxiety exists. It has very clear signs and symptoms, and we want to eliminate that to a place of living with this daily and preventing getting from a space of feeling like this, anxious, to full-blown acute panic disorder, because they can be very crippling. And so if we can recognize these signs early, then we can start to put in place what we need to be able to regulate and to simmer the response that we have, or the reactional response that we have to new circumstances.
That is a great point. We need to own, name it, and talk about it. So unfortunately, we are out of time, but I want to let you know that our next live event will be on May 25th, and it is called Love and Money, the hard family conversations you need to have. Joe, I'm sure you have amazing stories of all the families you work with on this topic. We've all had money drama. So we will sit down with experts and learn how to handle it. You can register now at scarymommy.com/live.work.thrive. So thank you to you both. I know you're really busy right now. You know, this is like peak season for women in your line of work. So, you know, we really thank you, Jenny, doctor, mom, champion for our kids, essential worker, getting us through this pandemic. Thank you so much for all you do. And Joe Frost, global parenting expert. If you want to hear more from Joe, she's giving us 2 tickets to her exclusive. It's harder than a Beyonce contest to get in with this intimate session with Joe, who's going to answer your parenting questions. So go to scarymommy.com, sign up for one of our events, and we'll be picking a name out of everyone that's on the list. So you can join Joe in a very small group setting where she'll be talking directly to parents who are looking to get some questions answered from the super nanny herself. So have a great night, everyone watching. You know, we're finally seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, and we've got your backs as we all do our best to support our kids. We are moms, and we know how to live, work, and thrive. Good night.